There is a new reality that must be shared. It is derived from talking to directors, producers, and talent reps over the past few weeks. On first glance, this might be difficult to hear, but full disclosure is really important to me. I've been hearing that there is a noticeable slowdown happening within the industry. Less production, fewer projects, and less work for everybody. I notice it too. Many of our casting projects have slowed to a crawl. Trying to get films financed, theaters to consider bigger cast shows, even talent losing representation, or reps losing their talent. Like I said, this is a first glance, though. We need to consider a better perspective. Look into this and stop saying, no work? What now? This is Casting Actors Cast.
This is Casting Actors Cast. Jeffrey Dreisbach brings you insights and inspiration. Make a difference in your acting and your acting career. Here's Jeffrey Dreisbach.
Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of Casting Actors Cast. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach. I'm a casting partner with McCorkle Casting in New York. How are you? Hope you're having a good day. I'm having a really good day, although I think this is kind of a challenging subject somewhat, because we need to take a look at what's happening right now in the industry. So this is a very timely podcast, I think. I think one in which once we get a healthy perspective, perhaps we're going to feel a little bit better about the situation we find ourselves in. But first, this is that moment of the podcast where I get to say thank you for tuning into Casting Actors Cast. I invite you to check out the website, castingactorscast, all one word.com. That's also my email address, castingactorscast@gmail.com. Also, if you go to the website, you're going to see a form that says dive into the talent pool. If you fill out that form, the form just asks for your name and your email address. If you do that, it's going to open up some freebies. One is a book on doing voiceover work. The other is a video called Casting Secrets, What They Don't Tell You. All of these are absolutely free. My gift to you. Also, I just want to alert you to the fact that Creative Coaching Partners, the course that I teach at Creative Coaching Partners called The Art of the Audition, is available. I also want to share with you that it's really exciting to be on the Broadway Podcast Network. We've transferred all of our shows to that network, so you can go back into the archives if you like. You can also do that on the website, by the way. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm really, really happy that you are on board. And a special thanks to those folks who have written to me. They're sending me all kinds of compliments and things, and I'm a little overwhelmed, but really I'm humbled and I'm so grateful. So this is a place for actors to get some information. This is a place, hopefully, that you can learn a little bit more about what's happening in the industry from a person who's casting. And that would be me. Finally, my shout out to my good friends at Actors Connection, actorsconnection.com/New York. So as we talk about this subject, I want to kind of break it down into little bits of information. So I'm going to call this little section Reality Bits, not Reality Bites. Okay, what I mean by that is let's take a look at the bigger picture. If we take a look at the bigger picture about what's happening in the industry, I think we're going to have a much better time of gaining a more useful perspective. And so I thought I'd come up with some true or false questions that I'll be able to answer, and that way you can make a decision about my opinion on this stuff, and maybe we can come to some kind of an understanding by just exposing some of these true or false questions. True or false? The writers' strike and new contract by the Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, they really killed the production because of the latest strike. True or false? Well, in my opinion, I think that's false. I think that once the strike was over, producers were in agreement about many of the areas that were happening to actors as a result of the technology, as a result of a new payment structure for residuals, and for, across the board, a lot of new payment incentives for actors. I don't necessarily think that it stopped production cold. I believe that there probably was some retooling. I believe that there probably was a rearrangement of stuff, but I just don't think that the writer's strike was responsible totally for kind of squashing the industry to where it is right now. So that's just my opinion about that. You might have a different opinion. I'd love to hear from you if you have a different thought about that. But I think to point the finger at the writer's strike is kind of not necessarily what's happening. I believe it is here's a good word, a convergence, of a lot of different factors. All right, true or false? Streaming services took a big financial hit and slowed new productions. Answer, in my opinion, I think that's true. I think that, for example, let's take Netflix, took a huge hit post-COVID. Then you add the writer's strike on top of that. Although there were a lot of viewerships, they had put out so much financial resources, so many projects that they were supporting, that it really affected their bottom line. So the streaming service, I think, as a reaction to that, of course, you recall in the news, we all heard about, really, what's the word? They're really clamping down on folks who were kind of stealing and using other people's accounts for Netflix, and that they really made an effort to squash that. This was all financially based. And so I think a lot of those projects that were sort of underway or being pitched, this is not only Netflix, by the way, I think that really did have a negative effect, and it slowed down production across the board on a lot of these streaming services. So I think that that's true. True or false? Regional theaters are struggling since COVID. Okay, my answer, I think it's partially true and partially false. I know that for the theaters that we've been casting, many of them have resorted to doing smaller cast shows. That's absolutely true. And of course, what does that mean? That means simply it's a matter of less production, less actors having opportunities available to them. But I also have to say, I think that's partially false. A lot of theaters are very, very smart about how they were going to get back into the swing of things. Barrington Stage, for example, is, I think, a good example. I believe that the planning and the outreach to the community made an impact. I also liked what I was seeing at George Street Playhouse in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Their outreach, their galas, all of the things that they're doing to try and bring that community support in. Then, of course, there are some other theaters who just kind of didn't get the energy back. And so they're struggling, losing subscription, losing audience. So I think it's kind of true and kind of false. Not across the board, but I certainly think that there is, I used this word earlier, I'll use it again, a retooling of what's happening theater-wise. All right, true or false? Actors are the only ones who are taking the hit. Well, obviously that's false. Across the board. I mentioned earlier that we at McCorkle Casting, although we're a very busy office, but we've noticed a very significant slowdown on the project. A lot of it has to do with the financial aspect, that a lot of films that we've been casting and are financed based on the cast. In other words, the producer will hire us and they'll say, if you get us a good cast, then we can complete our financing. Well, that puts a little bit of a burden on casting. I'll also say that that puts us in a position to be producers of a lot of these projects. And so we have a stake in the game if we're going to be providing a cast, and it is contingent on getting fully financed. then we want a little bit more participation in the production end of things. But I don't think actors are the only one that are getting hit. I know it's true for casting. I know that many agencies over the past year have shut down. They have shifted. There's been just a crazy change in the industry overall. However, I also have to say it's affecting producers. It's affecting everyone across the board. So no one is unfazed by the change that's been taking place. And that's my opinion. True or false, independent films are picking up the slack. I know that that is true. See, independent films are really, I think, the new wave of industry practice that is going to really stimulate not only the streaming services, but also theatrical release of motion pictures. Here's the thing. And it was prior to COVID, but then a little bit post-COVID, that a lot of the financing of these films were coming through China. A lot of Chinese investment in the film industry were happening. And right now, China seems to be kind of going through pretty much a recession. Their financial situation is such that they're not able to be the kind of financial, mega donors, contributors to feature films right now. They're pulled back dramatically, which of course has affected the industry. But back to my original point, independent films are picking up the slack for those investors who really see value in those smaller productions that can tell really interesting stories with really interesting writing and really interesting casting. And so I believe that independent films are going to continue to be growing exponentially. One example of this, and I know this is kind of a sideways example, but one example is the Toronto Film Festival, which is happening right now. Before, Toronto Film Festival was considered a wonderful film festival, but now it seems as if the Toronto Film Festival is a place where a lot of investors are hanging out, looking for that perfect new project to put money in, or that perfect story or writer, or connecting with other producers so that they can work together with each other to get a lot of this production underway. So that's changed rather dramatically. So it's not just like the Sundance Film Festival or Cannes, but even like places like Toronto Film Festival are really changing the landscape for investment opportunities for folks. Now let's move on from there. Is true or false? Broadway is dying. Well, I guess that's false. If you looked at what was happening in the most recent Tony Awards and the last Broadway season, it's exploding in such a really interesting way. Although a lot of those mid-range producers might be a little bit shy in terms of investment, that only means it's opening up opportunities for other investors who see value in some of the projects that are being produced. So it really looks like there are very strong support, and in terms of audiences, there's very strong audience support as well. More tourists coming into New York than at any other time in its history right now. So it's kind of exploding in an interesting way. Now, let's talk about this true or false question. New media and technology are picking up the slack. What do you think? Well, my answer is possibly. While we are enjoying a lot of new technology taking place within the film industry, there are new media sectors that seem to be growing in terms of their using actors for a lot of their projects, not the least of which is a lot of performers are turning into producing their own work. A lot of actors are writing their own screenplays. They're writing their own TV series so that they can put themselves in it. And so that's opening up a whole new world in terms of the new media. And I think that that's going to see and continue to grow exponentially. Speaking of technology, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I was so knocked out when I saw that there is underway. I mean, I don't know where they are in terms of how far along they are with this technology, but what's really amazing is the hologram technology, meaning that I foresee potentially, I don't know if you saw this, but I saw like there is like it looks like a phone booth, like an old-fashioned phone booth, but literally the hologram technology can project a full-size, three-dimensional version of somebody who's not there. Like, think about this for auditioning, for example, that you could have a hologram technology and literally feel like the actor is there with you in person for the audition. I mean, mind exploding. And if we're going to be developing that kind of technology, imagine what it's going to be doing for actors. Imagine what it could be doing for those projects that really haven't gotten the funding, or maybe they haven't gotten themselves in a position to have a full production. Man, oh man, this could open up an entire new world of new possibilities, I think. So new media and technology, I think they are picking up some slack. Now, you've heard me say this perhaps before, but change is inevitable, I think. And we're going through a change right now. But guess what? I believe that suffering about it is an option. And so as I look at the landscape right now, I think that there's a new financial shift for investors wanting to get into these smaller films. I think really interesting, unique stories told by really interesting, unique writers are coming to the forefront. It is looking like that independent film thing that I talked about earlier is actually growing exponentially. And so even, and this is happening more in Los Angeles, but we had a recent situation with the film that we were having some challenges getting financed. But now hearing about how financial folks are really putting the push on those reputable film companies, those smaller companies, to get product done, I think that there is a new hunger for that kind of product. And so I think that we're seeing this financial shift coming to fruition in a new, secure, interesting stream of investors, for sure. I also think that regional theaters are being used more for pre-Broadway and off-Broadway tryouts. See, before, the regional theaters were kind of known for popular material being shown for their region, for their area, for their demographic, for their audience, their subscription, subscribers that go to the theater on a regular basis. Now it's interesting that producers are looking at some of these regional theaters to help finance the cost of producing it for Broadway. They can make an investment in a regional theater. First of all, that spares you with a lot of out-of-town expenses if you can sort of split those costs with regional theaters. So the regional theater turns out to be perhaps a really great foundation for developing Broadway and off-Broadway productions. I think that's really positive. I think that's really interesting. Another thing I want to share with you is that writers are writing. Even after the writers' strike, there was this assumption that all these writers were writing all this stuff. And that might partially be true, but guess what? I don't think writers ever just stop writing. I think that it was a slow churning of seeing what the market will bear before some of these scripts got the attention that they deserve. So we have to give time. But as far as writers are writing, they're going to always be writing. It never stops. Plus, like I did mention this earlier, that there's a lot of talent out there who are writing their own material. I think that is potentially going to continue to grow and be really a viable arena for talent. Now, I'm not crazy about talking about this too much, but reality... reality television is becoming quite viable for actors. Now, you might think that that's a bizarre statement, But the popularity of reality television is that it's relatively easy and inexpensive to produce. And as long as there are colorful personalities that are involved in some of this reality television, just know that a lot of actors are finding it really interesting and exciting to be part of that reality television bandwagon. Now, like I said, I'm not sure how much acting training and professional acting work applies to reality television. I'm only talking about the potential for actors to find opportunities for themselves. And reality television, I don't think, should be dismissed either. And like I mentioned, I think performers are really, they're just simply finding ways to tell stories. They're finding ways to perform, whether it's on the local level, whether it's people getting together to do readings of plays or shows with an audience. I always believe that people are going to be starved for that human interaction that's going to make a significant impact and make a significant difference. So here are my steps to having a healthy perspective about all this. Well, you heard a lot of my theories. You may or may not agree with some of them. But here's the thing. I think we need to take active steps in order to feel better about what's taking place right now. And the first thing I would suggest is that we need to take a look at the big picture. Rather than getting into the moment-to-moment stuff with what's happening within the industry and, come up with the oh my gods that we might be having, I think it's a better idea to take a step back and take a look at it, because it's shifting, it is not ending. It's taking on a different perspective. It's taking on a different life. And we have to be open to seeing what that might be in time. So I also think it's important to identify the problem, then we can come up with a solution. It's only when you identify the problem that you come up with a solution. For example, a lot of really talented actors have been in contact with our office saying, oh, I just lost my agent. I've been with him for 15 years, and I'm not sure what I'm doing now. And amazingly talented folks. It seems that has less to do with talent and more to do with, of course, the financial incentive of getting people in to work as aggressively as possible. But you know what? There are still new projects in development. There are still new venues in development. And also, guess what? There are new agencies that are opening up their doors. So if there's a need, it's going to be filled. So please identify the problem and what your personal particular issue might be in terms of representation, whether it's an agent or a manager. But take a look at how it is just simply shifting. It is not closing doors, but new doors seem to be opening, in my view. Now, I've said this a lot, and I want to just move on to this next point about how to have a healthy perspective about all this. And I think it's important to reignite your learning and simply find creativity in everything that you're doing. If it's a little bit slow right now, just take a look, take stock of where you are in your career, where you are in your life. Keep everything in perspective. But you can also look for the creative elements in your day-to-day activity that can really help you still feel connected. You see, it's about feeling connected that I think can make a really significant positive impact on how you feel about the bigger picture. Now, like I said, remember that this is all only temporary. This is not going to be continuing on for the rest of our lives. I am sure of it. So if you agree with that, and I hope that you do, this is just based on my own experience where I'm sitting, but I want you to be ready. Don't let motivation take a back seat to feeling like the glass is half empty. I think that there's opportunity. I think that we're going to be seeing a shift in the paradigm for sure, but I don't think it necessarily has to be thought of in a painful way. Just show up. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I've enjoyed bringing this podcast to you. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email address, castingactorscast@gmail.com or castingactorscast.com. Fill out that form. Find out more about the podcast. Also, please, if you would, please leave a like and a share. Anything that you could do, especially on iTunes. If you give me a positive review, it just makes such a difference for getting up into the rankings, which makes a difference for me and hopefully for you as well as I continue to do these podcasts. Again, my thanks. We'll see you next time on Casting Actors Cast.